Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome Mr. Emmanuel Bensa, who is the Deputy Executive Director, AfCFTA Policy Network Group. Please, let's give him a big round of applause. Playing a key role. Oh, is that what he can do for a man who is sacrificing for Africa to see great trade?
I think I should just step down after that. As I always like to tell up-and-coming youth, titles do not make you. Titles only open doors. So, yeah, this is the title I have, but when I wake up every morning, I'm an ECOWAS and EU policy analyst, I'm an AfCFTA enthusiast, I'm at this, I'm at that. So many roles, we all have that. What we're trying to do with the AfCFTA Policy Network is to make history by helping people understand what the African Continental Free Trade Area is about. So we have a awareness realization mandate, that's what I said, trying to educate people about what AfCFTA policy is. It took a long time for us to come up with the title before we registered it almost 2 years ago, because we realized that if we just focus on AfCFTA, people may not necessarily understand. So we said AfCFTA policy, and AfCFTA policy includes everything to do with AfCFTA, but including regional integration, peace and security, and some of the issues that are important for understanding how the African continent works. Now, but in essence, let me just quickly say what we are. The AfCFTA Policy Network is a regional integration think tank. That is how we are trying to position ourselves, because some of the things that we are doing speaks to those issues. Hopefully, in July, we'll be starting some work with the International Organization for Migration, helping to popularize the Freedom of Movement Protocol, because those are some of the very important issues that we think need to be popularized. We're talking a lot about trade, but if we are not moving freely, we cannot trade. And we have only 4 ratifications of the Freedom of Movement Protocol. We just had Algeria as a 37th member state yesterday. You can see the disconnect already, 37 ratifications and then 4 for the freedom of movement. And yet you have 2 regions, ECOWAS, the West Africa region, you have the East Africa region. Together, that's 15, that's maybe 22, 24 countries that do free movement in their respective regions very well. So not quite understand why at the continental level it's not happening, and that needs to happen very quickly. I said we are a regional integration policy network, regional integration think tank. And we're unique in a couple of ways. Number one, we are membership-based, which means that we need to focus on our members. We have members numbering over 200, 300 on paper, although the actual figures are a little bit more, because there are a number of people who say that they are members by association. So you end up saying that they are affiliated to APN, and you have to look through the page and say, how exactly are you affiliated to us? And so on and so forth. That always happens. But we have, our membership is important to us because we need to help them understand why the African Continental Free Trade Area is important, as SMEs, as private sector, and that kind of thing. But the reason why the membership is also important is because not everyone understands how the African Continental Free Trade Area started. We don't have time to bore them about the history. There was the whole conception around it is clear. It's in the history books for you to read. So the boosting intra-African trade started in 2011, 2012. There's a tripartite free trade area in 2015. And then 2017, the negotiations around what was then the Continental Free Trade Area kicked off and then became the African Continental Free Trade Area by 2019, signed in Kigali in 2018, and then we are where we are. COVID came and disturbed everyone, and here we are. But still with the AfCFTA Policy Network, one of the reasons why we're unique is also because apart from the fact that we are seeking to offer awareness creation, which is what a lot of people are doing, we're also seeking to offer what I would call policy coherence. Let me take the mask off. Policy coherence around the African Continental Free Trade Area. So it's not just about people trading, it's also about bringing people to understand that the African Continental Free Trade Area did not just fall out from the sky, that it was a creation of something The African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat was the idea of the Department of Trade and Industry of the African Union, thinking that they needed a whole new institution to help people understand how the whole inter-African trade journey would work. And so that was how the whole thing happened. The whole thing could have been done in the Department of Trade and Industry at the African Union in Addis. And I think we would have been in a lot of trouble, because already if you look at the pressure that the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat is under from SMEs, private sector, about the work that they're doing, you can see that there's a whole lot of work to do. Now, so policy coherence. Whilst we understand that intra-African trade is important, for us as well, with our different experiences, working in different AU spaces, there's the African peer review mechanism, for example, that I have talked about in different spaces. They've just recently signed an MOU with the AfCFTA Secretariat to help, monitor the compliance by member states. So for us, we have worked around APRM issues. We've also worked around NEPAD and AUDA as well, and we're also reaching out to what some call the mid-run institutions of the AU, which is the Pan-African Parliament, APRM, and NEPAD. Key institutions that will help people understand how everything gels together around the African Union. So for us, with the new work that we're going to do with the International Organization for Migration, for us, it's also about understanding that migration, what some people call the mobility component of the AfCFTA. Mobility because it's about moving, and therefore there are different components of the African Continental Free Trade Area. But the mobility component is the bit about migration, peace and security. There are peace and security conversations around the African Continental Free Trade Area that need to be unpacked. Kenya, for example, is a very big player is beginning to position itself in East Africa as a big player on African Continental Free Trade Area. Kenya is an IGAD, but Kenya is also a key player in the African Union mission in Somalia. There's going to be a drawdown of troops by the end of this year, which therefore means that Kenya will necessarily have to withdraw from AMISOM, which is an AU peace enforcement force, which has been running for over 15 years. What then happens to Somalia, which is a weak state? Does Somalia now focus on peace and security issues at the expense of the African Continental Free Trade Area when it signed only in August 2020 the African Continental Free Trade Area? These are some of the considerations that are out there, buried in the literature, that we need to bring out and unpack for people. So there are peace and security dimensions, there are migration dimensions, there are issues around even our parliamentarians at the continental level understanding how all this connects together. The regional economic community considerations. How do regional economic communities prepare themselves for the African Continental Free Trade Area? We know ECOWAS has the ECOWAS Trade and Liberalization Scheme, but is it working well? Some say it's a mini AfCFTA, but is it working well enough to be considered a mini AfCFTA for this larger conversation? Then there are regional groupings like COMESA, 22 countries that are doing very well. A lot of the best practices of AfCFTA have been taken from COMESA. So AfCFTA is an opportunity. The word game changer has been bandied around all over, but it is really truly a game changer for everybody involved in it and outside it. Let me just finally conclude on the final reason why we are a little bit unique. We also partners to a new idea called the Africa Private Sector Summit. Now, the Africa Private Sector Summit, we had the first meeting in March, and we're going to have the second one in September, and it's going to hopefully be hosted by the government of Ghana. The idea of the Africa Private Sector Summit is having a four-way conversation where academia, private sector, civil society, and consumers talk in a concerted way about what they need to do coherently in bringing the AfCFTA to life. So you can see that there are different things that we're doing in different spaces to ensure that we bring coherence to the whole AfCFTA conversation. So it's not just about a policy network talking about intra-African trade and having members. We're doing very different things all over, trying to make sure that those things eventually end up in giving a better, coherent overview of the whole African Continental Free Trade Area. So, Regional Integration Think Tank, that's what we are. We're very happy to have you here today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. Thank you for AAU TV and all the other media that have made time to come as well.
Your Excellency, Mene Wankele, Secretary General of AfCFTA Secretariat, Chairman, distinguished trade representatives from American Embassy, British High Commission, Canadian High Commission, Japanese Embassy, Director of Sub-Regional ECA, West Africa, Head of UNDP Ghana, distinguished invited stakeholders, distinguished awardees, and invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I will not forget the very last time that we were having a consultative meeting during the AfCFTA process. And I sat by foreign ambassador, an American ambassador in another country, and he asked me, "Gentlemen, where are you going? You look like you're going for a conference." And I said, yes, it was on African Continental Free Trade. And I'll never forget the question she asked me, "Are you sure it will be successful?" And I said that the very reason why you see me on this plane is the success of the story. The African Continental Free Trade area has come to stay. It is our wealth pool to transform our industrialization agenda. Congratulations to all member states, governments, stakeholders, private sector, civil society, the media, for the great role that you have played. Today, I welcome you to partner with this great agreement, invite you to this summit, for us to underscore the importance of AfCFTA trading since January 1st, and acknowledge and join forces to promote African goods and services, which will form the basis of our rich market. Africa has launched her good book, and I call this book the African Continental Free Trade. We must be the doers of the book. We must not tear our own pages. So together, posterity will also reap the coming benefits. I therefore declare this summit open. Thank you.
Our distinguished guests from the development partner community, our special guests, and also permit me to specially recognize our colleague Joyce from the US, who has come all the way to be with us today. She is from our office in Virginia. And a captain of industry who is also here with us, Mr. Sorry. My colleagues at the APN, and also let me say that even though I'm passionate and looking at everything at the back on the level, I want to especially acknowledge SME owners and entrepreneurs who are with us today, because I believe sincerely for all that I've done and how far I've come, without these people, we wouldn't get anywhere. That is where everything begins. That is where it all begins. And without them, I'm not too sure that we'll be talking about products and services that we need to trade at the level of the Africa Continental Free Trade. I'm also happy that the captain of the ship himself is here. And if you have taken time to listen to this man, you will see that all his dream is about Africa. And he deeply recognizes the fact that trade and investment is driving global development. And without trading amongst ourselves in Africa, African continent will not get far. So once again, I acknowledge you deeply for the work you've done over the years, whilst we were also working hard in our various capacities in the private sector here and at the Ministry of Trade and Industry here to move Ghana ahead to where we are today. Currently, intra-African exports stands very low at about 17% of the total continental exports. It is crucial that we consciously work at this to be able to bring inclusiveness to whatever it is that we do in by way of development. Trading began in January this year, and a lot has happened by way of negotiations in all areas to ensure that the momentum that we had to bring the AfCFTA to being, we maintain that momentum to be able to ensure that we achieve the entire objectives. Overall, the implementation of the AfCFTA is expected to significantly increase intra-African trade and promote structural transformation of the economies of our various countries across Africa. It would also eventually help us to realize and enjoy the benefits of free movement of our people across the continent, and also to appropriate the benefits of the estimated 3 trillion US GDP economic growth within the African continent. As a crucial part of the AU Agenda 2063, the main objectives of the AfCFTA are to create a continental market for goods and services with free movement of people and capital, and pave the way towards creating eventually a customs union. This is very important, and also to help achieve competitiveness at the firm level across the continent. The AfCFTA Policy Network, Ghana and Diaspora, an international think tank and advocacy organization, has the vision to promote the effective implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade with a perspective on the private sector. In this regard, the AfCFTA Policy Network recognizes that a considerable amount of work is urgently needed to ensure that private sector participation is real and very practical. Therefore, stakeholders, including all civil society organizations, entrepreneurs, NGOs within the private sector, need to engage actively and participate in all areas of the negotiations, so that we all together will help eliminate challenges and to help achieve the objectives of the AfCFTA. Uniquely, APN is recognized by the AU as the international policy think tank that represents the collective interest of private sector, both on the continent and the world at large. With this recognition, the APN has seized the opportunity to advocate the interests of the private sector throughout the implementation of the AfCFTA. Ladies and gentlemen, barely 2 months after the APN was established, our management decided to organize a sensitization seminar for the media to appreciate the AfTA. Thus, selected media organizations and individuals were invited on October 30th, 2019, to a briefing on the AfTA and the way forward, way before implementation even started. Today, the EPN is offering yet another sensitization event that examines trading under AfTA 6 months after the historical commencement on January 1st, 2021. Today's event will also afford us the opportunity to be abreast with all the technical issues regarding the implementation of free trade from the experts since commencement. I wish that we all participate actively in this event so that by living here, we would be abreast really of what is happening, and we will be prepared to play our roles in the successful implementation of the AfTA. I thank you very much for your attention.
Your Excellency, the Secretary General, and let me stand on existing protocols and make these brief comments. I was actually trying to ask Weku, please don't ask me to speak. But I think that the success of AfTA will be a great success to businesses in Africa in general and Ghana in particular. So what we're looking forward to as industrialists, as private sector players, is to see that discussions on African integration through business, would not be left at the governmental levels. It's good. If you have heads of states, ministers, and you actually see the various fanfares that go on. But we believe that the real players must be integrated. Because I just want to share a brief, a lot of us know, but let me mention that. If you want to send goods from Ghana to Nigeria, the number of borders, barriers, stop posts, and so on and so forth that you meet, you would want to ask whether how far have we gone with ECOWAS integration, the various protocols we've signed, and then how far do we want to go? I remember very well in 2014 when my business decided to explore Liberian market, and we got a customer who was ready to order about 20 containers every other month. So going by road was out of the question, so we're actually looking at by sea. And here we have to wait for vessel from Spain to come so that we can load our containers on to get to Liberia. Now, once the vessel comes, they say, well, this time around we can take only 3 containers. Now, I'm just sharing these experiences so that we can position ourselves and ask ourselves the various questions that will help us this time around to ensure that AfTA will work. It's a great opportunity, especially for Ghanaian businesses, once we have the Secretariat here, that we need to prepare ourselves. We're not looking at the challenges alone, but we're also looking at opportunities that AfTA offers, for businesses. Once we remain here, a domestic market of about 30 million, now our businesses remain small. Even in the sub-region of about 350 million people, it's so small. But if we look at dealing with 1.2, 1.3 billion people, then definitely we want to move out there. Now, if we as Ghanaian businesses don't take the opportunity, prepare ourselves, position ourselves, retool, build capacities, we'll be swamped by other businesses from other countries. And I don't think that is what we are really ready, to see. So my probably brief caution is that let us be careful, let us prepare. Don't let us sit. Normally what happens is that as private sector players or businesses, what will happens is that we have so many challenges, so we only focus on the narrow challenges that we face in. The interest rates, which in Ghana between 25 and 30%, whereas there are other businesses that are having single-digit interest rate, and these are the businesses that are competing with us here. So we have fixated on these challenges, sometimes erratic power supply, and so on and so forth, and we lose sight of the bigger picture and into the future. This time around, we can't actually afford to do that, and we must be on board. We must move with the key players who are making AfCFTA work, and I believe that when we do that, our businesses will also grow. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the very warm welcome. It really is a pleasure for me to be here. I want to thank the chairman, Mr. Joe Taki, thank the executive director for really all the hard work that you have done. You were actually the very first NGO organization to be established in support of the initiative of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So I congratulate you for that vision. I have just come from a meeting of senior trade officials. They are meeting here in Accra. They will be followed by ministers. And I was asked, where are you going? These senior trade officials are here. Where are you going? I said, well, actually, the beneficiaries of this agreement are the ones who are expecting me. Private sector, civil society. That is why we have this agreement. It's not for people like me, trade negotiators. It is for the private sector. It is for civil society. It is for Africans to really feel the impact of this potentially very transformative instrument that all of us, collectively, all of us as Africans, have been able to achieve. And it's the singular greatest achievement, in my very humble view, since the end of colonialism and the defeat of apartheid in South Africa. Potentially very, very transformative, and singularly the most important instrument that we have ever, as Africans, been able to achieve in a record time. In less than 5 years, we've made significant progress. And it's important in its transformative potential because of the general character of our economy. Smallness of national economies, fragmentation of markets, lack of industrial capacity, lack of economies of scale, lack of productive capacity, and really what I call a continued reliance on the export of primary commodities, and something that retains us in a colonial economic model, which we have sustained over the last 60 years as the African continent. And that is why there's not a single region and not a single country that would be able to be globally competitive on its own. There's not a single region of this continent that can trade itself out of poverty without interconnecting with the rest of the continent. And so our founding mothers and fathers, they had this vision from 1963, the establishment of the Organization of African Unity, that actually once we achieve political independence and integration, political integration on the African continent, the very next challenge we have to confront is market integration and ensuring that we have seamless movement of goods, ensuring that we have seamless movement of persons across the borders of the African continent. And so they achieved the initial objective. It is now up to you and I to follow through on this very next challenge of market integration. So May 1963, our founding mothers and fathers expressed this vision. And then at the entry into force of this agreement, we began the next phase of this very, very important objective on the African continent. I was asked a few months ago by a journalist, well, what is happening? I don't see large volumes of trade. I don't see anything. And the journalist happened to be from one of these very big newspapers in London. So I said, let us be intellectually honest. Let's be honest. It took the European Union precisely 72 years to reach this level of market integration, this depth of integration. When the integration process started in Europe 72 years ago, who was asking Europe at that point? 3 years down the line, 3 months down the line rather, where are the trade flows? And where is this thing going? So we must really be intellectually honest about the challenge that we confront, about the difficulty of the challenge, but we must also realize the very unique opportunity that we have, that since the end of colonialism and the defeat of apartheid, we have never had this opportunity before as a continent. So we now have 38 countries that have ratified the agreement establishing the AfCFTA. We have only one country that has not signed it in Africa. So 38 countries have committed to liberalization of trade, liberalization of investment, liberalization of services, as well as other pillars of this agreement. The political momentum is there, the legal commitment is there, at least amongst the 37 countries or 38 countries who have ratified this agreement. Our ambition is very high. We want to make sure that by the year 2035, 97% of goods being traded in Africa are traded at zero duty by the year 2035. And that where we trade in services, these services are traded freely without regulatory barriers. It's a huge ambition. And it is, when we think about it, it appears insurmountable. But it is entirely possible that in 15 years' time, we can double intra-Africa trade and change the face of this continent in terms of its economic character. I mentioned earlier about our underdeveloped industrial capacity. When you consider, and I made this example last week, when you consider the fact that coffee that is produced here in Africa, raw coffee and exported at about $6 billion annually. It is processed abroad and it contributes to a $100 billion industry annually. So that means that almost 95% of value chain production, Africa loses it because of this deep underdeveloped manufacturing capacity and underdeveloped industrial capacity on our continent. So we have a very unique opportunity to leverage on this agreement because it says reduce your tariffs by the year 2035 to 0 or 97% of products. And second, it says that you cannot have any type of a non-tariff barrier that you so desire. It will now be subject to very, very strict regulations, and you will be found, if you are to be found on the wrong of these regulations that regulate non-tariff barriers, you have to remove them. So we have to ensure that the AfCFTA leverages, and the manufacturing rather leverages on this very, very conducive environment that this agreement establishes for industrial development to be accelerated, Africa's industrial capacity to be accelerated, and for Africa's manufacturing capacity to be accelerated. We have, as you heard, we have a market of 1.3 billion people, a combined GDP that is at $3.4 trillion, a very, very dynamic and young population. So we have a market that is Africa, potentially as globally competitive as India or China, provided we do the right things. Provided we do the right things. So the ambition is not just high-level ambition, but we have matched it in the rules. We now have a protocol on trading goods, a protocol on trading services. We will have protocols on intellectual property rights, on competition, investment protection, digital trade, and women and young people in trade. So actually, when you come to think about it, we are already designing a common market. That is the high-level ambition that we have. And in designing this common market, the beneficiaries, I don't believe, are going to be governments, because governments don't create jobs. The beneficiaries are going to be the private sector. It is the private sector that invests in innovation, job creation, research and development, and so on. And so that is why we are going to host a first of its kind here in Ghana, at least since the Secretariat has been established. We will bring together Africa's private sector in an AfCFTA business forum so that we can together collaborate and find solutions that will be sustainable for implementation of this agreement. We're not going to be able to do it without the private sector. And we won't be able to do it without the support of civil society. And so that is why this AfCFTA business forum and collaboration as a permanent, ongoing platform for dialogue is so critical, so that we share the responsibility of implementation of this agreement. I know that, that it is, as they say, talk is cheap. Talk is very, very cheap. So we will have to make sure that all of us collectively, that we take full responsibility for implementation of this agreement within our respective mandates, whether we are in business, the private sector, AfCFTA policy network. All of us have to take responsibility for implementation of this agreement. And so I was very happy when AfCFTA offered to be a strategic partner to us. And since we have entered into this strategic partnership with AfCFTA, we have been able to achieve a number of things. First, we are establishing a Pan-African payments and settlement platform, which will help us to resolve some of these challenges that we confront today with currency convertibility, the cost of it. As you know, we have over 42 currencies in our continent. If you want to trade with somebody, and if you are an SME, you want to trade with somebody, you are in Ghana with somebody in Kenya, you first have to convert the cedi to the dollar, transact, they convert the dollar to the cedi, and that adds about $5 billion worth of costs to doing business, to trading on the continent. This Pan-African Payments and Settlement Platform will resolve some of these challenges of the cost of currency convertibility and the reasons why we may, in part, why we may be, why we may not be reaching the level of intra-Africa trade that we should be reaching. Second, we are establishing digital platforms that will include the universe of ease of doing business technologies. For example, in this digital platform that we call Africa Trade Gateway, you as a small medium enterprise will now be able to interconnect with a small medium enterprise in another part of the continent, giving you an opportunity to grow your business, expand into new markets, and become globally and regionally competitive as a small medium enterprise. And this is something that will, in fact, accelerate interconnectivity of small medium enterprise and businesses across the African continent. We are also establishing an adjustment fund, and this adjustment fund is designed to assist countries who, because of reducing tariffs and eliminating tariffs, they may lose revenue. These countries that are in this particular circumstance will now be able to access the fund for productive sector investment. The fund is in 3 pillars. There will be a portion of contributions from governments, from companies or investors, in other words, a credit component, as well as a component for the international community. It is not designed to be supporting government budget support. The intention of the fund is for direct investment sector, productive sector investment. So if you make an assessment that your textiles industry is suffering, you will be able to access the fund to provide assistance to the textiles industry in your country. If for whatever reason it is becoming uncompetitive, you will be able to consider measures that will make your sector in your country more competitive. These are some of the practical steps that we have already taken. As I say, working with the private sector and working with Afrexim Bank in particular, who have made, for the fund, who have made $1.5 billion available immediately, which is to be increased. We will jointly mobilize investment, and we want to increase it to $40 billion. But ultimately, we don't want this situation to continue, where governments consider tariffs to be a revenue-generating tool. We want tariffs and tariff policy to be an industrial development tool, so that Africa can move forward in the next decades or so. So industrial development, establishment of value chains is the heart of this agreement. That is where Africa has to be more competitive and make significant improvements, is in industrial development, establishment of regional value chains, improving our productive capacity. It is really, I said this again last week, it makes me embarrassed as an African that all of us, 55 of us, our contribution to global trade is less than 3%. Not even Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Egypt, Morocco, all of us, our contribution to global trade is very, very small. And that is largely because of this colonial economic model, which we sustained ourselves, because we want to continue exporting unprocessed raw materials, which we did over the last 60 years or so. So we now have an opportunity, and which is what our heads of states directed us to do. We have an opportunity to leverage on this agreement to fundamentally transform Africa's economy, not just for the next 10, 15 years, but to permanently transform the structure of Africa's economy. The starting point is industrial development, leveraging on this agreement. There's no shortcut. And that is why the point I made earlier that I made to the journalist, that is why it is so critical. Because we know from the experience of other parts of the world that industrialization does not happen overnight. You don't swallow a pill, you wake up the next day, you've industrialized. It takes decade after decade of disciplined implementation of an industrial policy and industrial strategy, something that we have not been able to do as a continent. Let me close, Mr. Chairman, by making an example of what I mean. A global company that manufactures vehicles says to me, Secretary General, we are today at 6 million units per year of cars. We want in 5 years' time to be at 10 million units of cars per year. All our components today are manufactured in other parts of the world. We have only an assembly capacity in Africa. We don't manufacture, we bring in components and we assemble vehicles and we send them to the rest of the continent. And the reason is because we have not had a common market or a single market, a single set of rules for the African continent. We have been fragmented and we have kept ourselves in this state of fragmentation for too long. So that if you are this global company, you want to establish a presence in West Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa, it's too complicated. It's too costly because you must adhere to local content rules in West Africa, that's say 20%, local content rules in Southern Africa, that's say 40%, local content rules in East Africa, that's say 55%. So who's going to invest in that context? It is too costly. And so the result is that the investment becomes concentrated in parts of the continent that are already relatively industrialized. And we want to change this pattern of industrialization and this pattern of investment. We want to make sure that we now establish these value chains across the continent. Because if you have a local content requirement that says 40% for the whole of Africa, we now can bring in other countries into the value chain and production of vehicles. That's the point that this CEO was making to me, that you have a very unique opportunity to position the continent for global competitiveness for investment by a single set of rules for trade and investment. That's why this agreement is so very important, because it gives us at least that chance. As a continent, it gives us at least that chance to compete. So I expect that in 4 to 5 years' time, we should be able to say, we have a common set of rules. If you want to invest in pharmaceuticals, if you want to invest in the auto sector, we have a common set of rules that apply across the countries that have ratified this agreement. If we don't implement it, if we allow the challenges, the daily challenges and the daily difficulties of integrating so many different markets on the continent, we are not going to succeed. We will remain in this condition that we have been in for the last 60 to 70 years. So when people say to me, oh, it is a pipe dream, it's not going to happen, it's too difficult, there are too many challenges, there's a political insecurity here and there. Yes, all of those things are true. But in my view, the alternative is even worse, because the alternative is where we have been. That's the stark reality. It's remaining embedded in this condition of underdevelopment from an industrial development and productive point of view. So this is the choice that we have as Africans. That's the choice. We throw our hands in the air, we say it's too difficult. Or we march on and we confront the challenges. The World Bank, in their report, and I don't always agree with the World Bank, I'm sorry if there's somebody from the World Bank here, but the World Bank projected that if we implement this agreement effectively, by the year 2035, we have an opportunity to lift 100 million Africans out of poverty and to contribute to Africa's GDP by up to $450 billion and to boost intra-Africa trade by up to 80%. And largely the beneficiaries of these positive projections will be women in trade and small medium enterprises. Very encouraging to read this from the World Bank. But it won't happen on its own. These projections won't happen by themselves. We as Africans, all of us, will have to work hard to make sure that these very positive projections become a reality. Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. It is important for us to honor our heroes while they live. And we have to do it not too long ago. We have to do it now. We want to appreciate, for the first time, taking this office and not giving up, in spite of all the facial things that you experience in terms of the many challenges we know. We want to appreciate the Secretariat also for taking the bold step. You didn't come to heaven. At least you came to meet some challenges, but you were able to stay. And we want to use this award to let you know we are with you, to support you and support the Secretariat. I want to welcome the Chairman to do this honor by presenting the award to you, and then we'll take a shot with you before you take your leave. Thank you.
just honoring that, and they just want you in there one way or the other. So we'll just invite them within 5 minutes, and then you do the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. James Asareje is already here. He's the CEO of Asatec Roofing. Please kindly, kindly, West Africa Deco Tiles, if you are here for your support, for your ingenuity, please come in. He needs to go very fast. Casa Preco, if you are here, you can also line up. Okay. Casa Preco ready, please. So Casa Preco is doing a lot. They've permeated the Nigerian market, looking forward to other African economies, and it's one of the finest when it comes to the beverages industry in Ghana, and we're looking forward to see them expand to other areas. Please. CEO mentions that the dream of this business was to be throughout West Africa, but we've had our challenges, we've had our difficulty. We're still in Ghana. Today with AfCFTA, we believe we'll go further. Please, if you are here, line up. Kindly give us a plaque.